Hey, welcome everybody to Pro Mindset Podcast. This is your host, Craig Domann. I've got a gentleman on today, Larry Hagner, who is he's got a passion that mirrors my passion. One of my passions is my kids, being a father, being a dad. I've got a daughter that's got her kind of a monumental birthday today, big 30 for Riley. Larry Hagner, welcome to Pro Mindset today.
Happy birthday, Riley. Big 30. That's awesome, man. Glad to be here.
Okay. So Larry, share with us your story. Like, how did your brand right now is about, the dad game, but what is the story before that?
Man, my story, I guess it really started when I was a kid. I have kind of a unique sort of crazy story, or at least I've been told and been telling.
Larry, we all got crazy stories.
I know we do. Maybe mine's not so unique, but I'll share it. So, here's my story. My mom and dad were married young. 21 years old, I think they got married. They had me when they were 25. I was born in 1975. But maybe within a year, they got divorced of me being born, and my dad left. And I didn't know him, didn't know of him. In fact, I remember being in preschool, and I remember my friends and their dads would pick them up from school. So I knew what a dad was. Some dads wear suits, some dads wear jeans, some dads wear sweatpants, whatever it is. But my interpretation of a dad was moms go out and find dads. So my mom hadn't found my dad yet. At least that's the way I thought of it. And I'll never forget when I was about 5 and my mom told me one day, she's like, hey, I'm going to have a friend over for dinner tonight. He's a friend from work and we've been friends for a while. And I think it's just time for you to meet him. And I was like, okay, well, so, basically her way of saying I've been dating someone in the workplace. And dude, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget this guy walking in my house and, it was cold outside. He was wearing a 3-piece suit, a trench coat. He had a briefcase. There were no iPads, obviously, back then. And I remember this guy walking in. I just got this feeling of like, wow, that's him. That's got to be the dad, right? She found the dad.
Mom found your dad.
Mom found the dad. So like shook his hand. And then literally the first thing that came out of my mouth was, are you going to be my dad? That's what I asked him. And I remember my mom like gasping, I think, and he just laughed. And then we shook hands, and about 6 months later, they got married. I think my mom kind of took that as like sort of that Jerry Maguire moment where the little kid, hugs Tom Cruise and she's like, oh my gosh, like this is the dude. Right. And so they were married for about 5 years. It was cool for the first year. And then it got really bad, meaning a lot of drinking, a lot of arguing, a lot of fighting, a lot of physical abuse, a lot of emotional abuse. My mom and him and me, and it was crazy. It was nuts. They got divorced when I was 10 and he was my dad. Actually, I called him dad. He adopted me. My last name is actually his. And when he left, I've never seen him since. And I found out about 15 years ago, he passed away. So, and the only reason I know that is because I got a knock on my door from the courts letting me know that he left a house to me. And I told them, hey, I'm not interested. You can have the house, give it to the county. I don't really care. And off they went. When I was about 12, I just started asking a lot of questions about like, wait a second, like, where did I come from? I knew about the birds and the bees. And that's when my mom laid it on me that she had been married before. I actually did not know that up until about that point. And then I had an opportunity to meet my dad, my real dad, and I had never met him. And I still remember to this day, like the day that I met him, what I wore, what he had on. And it was like euphoric. And I had no idea that he lived like 3 miles from us. And we hung out for about 6 months, and he was remarried at the time. He had a 2-year-old son and another one on the way. And we had a great time for about 6 months. And then after about 6 months, our relationship dissolved. And that was tough, man. It was very, very tough. And I just sort of kind of gave up as a kid. I kind of emotionally ate, got really heavy and fat. I failed the 8th grade. Actually, I do 8th grade over again. It wasn't because I wasn't smart enough. I just sort of gave up. I repeated the 8th grade and then went on to high school, went on to college and lost a bunch of weight. And then I met my college sweetheart and got a degree in health management and went on to pharmaceutical sales and medical device sales. And I was in that space for a while. And when I was, this all kind of culminates when I was 30 years old. And by the way, looking back on it, my mom she got married three times total and then dated a variety of men in between, but all of them were like the same dude, just heavy drinkers, very abusive. So those 18 years was a revolving door of just really toxic men in my life and in my mom's life. And when I was 30, married, 2 years, son on the way. I'm in a coffee shop for a work meeting, and a gentleman walked in, and gentleman caught my eye, and I just like looked, and I was like, "Wow, wouldn't you know it? That's my dad, the one I hadn't seen since I was 12." And he came in just to get his morning coffee. didn't see me. I saw him. And that interaction ended up turning into what has now been 20 years of us having a relationship. And what I can tell you is that fatherhood was like the one thing that I didn't want to mess up. And being married, I want to be married one time. And what I can tell you, I was headed for disaster in a lot of ways. I wasn't abusive. I wasn't beating my kids or anything like that. But how Dad Edge got started, it was a dark night when my oldest son was 6 and my youngest at the time was 4. And my 4-year-old stepped out of line. And I always promised myself, because I was hit a lot as a kid, I'm never going to strike my children out of anger. And I broke that promise that night. And I spanked him and he hit the ground. And that I will never forget. And when I went to go help him up, because I was like, oh my gosh, like what the hell did I just do? I literally reached for him and he rolled over and he saw me like coming for him. And he literally just closed his eyes like and shuddered like, don't hurt me. And I was like, that was it. That was it. That was the line in the sand. Seeing that kid's face reminded me of exactly what I went through growing up. And I was like, not on my watch anymore. I'm going to do this different. And what I did that night is I surrendered just to the fact that like, I have no clue what the heck I'm doing. And what would it be like if I just surrendered to the fact that I can learn it? Like, what would that look like? Can I just learn it just like anything else? And that was 13 years ago. And what I can tell you of 13 years of still learning this, will never stop learning this. I still consider myself a student of this, is that I will never stop learning. And I have 4 boys today, 19, 17, 11, 9. I'll be married 22 years this year. We've got a great, tight, close-knit, connected family. I probably wouldn't be walking this earth today if it wasn't for the Dad Edge. I probably would be divorced. I probably wouldn't be here, to be honest with you. So that's my story, man.
That is unique and also awesome. Okay, there's somebody listening right now that's got to jump off in like 2 minutes. What do they need to hear in the next 2 minutes that's going to keep them listening?
I think what dads need to hear in particular is that if you don't know what to do when it comes to fatherhood or when it comes to marriage or how to connect with your kids or become more patient, join the club. It's okay. But if you continue to tune on to this podcast, chances are you'll probably learn a thing or two from my bonehead mistakes and some of the things that I've learned in doing this work for over a decade. So if you don't know what you're doing and you're a little lost in your marriage and with parenting, like I said, join the club and stay tuned because we're probably going to get to it.
What are the 2 or 3 fundamentals of being a great dad?
So I think one of the fundamentals that I think we miss a lot, I know I did, was, and you come from football, is that we view parenting as like X's and O's, right? It's kind of like point and shoot, do this, do that. I want my kids to do this. I want my kids to do that. Versus one thing that we live by in this house is, at least my wife and I do, is without connection, we have no influence with our kids. Without connection, we have no influence. And the real gap becomes, how do I connect with my kids? Wife too, right? But how do I connect with my kids? In other words, if I could really broad stroke this, I'm my kid's 3 a.m., right? And it takes a lot of effort and a lot of reps and a lot of things that done right in order to create that environment of psychological safety where your kids will tell you everything. And a lot of people view their kids, especially as they get older, my kids won't, they're teenagers, they shut down, they're not going to tell you anything. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, my kids do tell me, I would like to think probably almost everything, because they'll tell me things and I'm like, wow, I would have never said that or shared that with my parents growing up. But it hasn't been without tremendous daily effort of getting those reps in of connection over influence. Because at the end of the day, we really, if you really think about it, we don't have a ton of control over our kids, especially as they get older, right? But we do have influence. And if we don't have connection with them, we can talk to them as they're, talk with them until we're blue in the face. But we're really not going to have any impact unless we have that connection with them. So connection over influence is 1.
Okay, let's not go to 2. Let's stick on 1. Let's go. How do you build the foundation of connection?
I think a lot of it has to do with the quality of the questions and conversations that we have in our family. So one of the things that we live by, and like I said, all these things I'm talking about, I used to suck at really, really badly. But deep human connection is the forefront of our family. So like, for instance, very, very few and far between will you ever hear us ask each other, how was your day? It's a very surface level, popular question that we ask everybody. And it gets us a really surface level answer of good, fine, crazy, busy, boring, right? The 1-word answers. Instead, I really love the skill of asking our kids deep questions that lead to deep conversation, that bring them energy. In our community, we call them generative questions. In your marriage, it's called deep, intimate conversation starters, but let's stick with generative questions. I like to ask my kids at least 3 questions a day, and I always get a story. And not always, sometimes I have to dig a little deeper, but for the majority of the time, it's a great skill to have, and it's not a default. So like one of the things I'll ask my kids is, dude, like what happened today that brought you joy? Or I'll ask them, dude, what was the best part of your day today? And I'll ask them like that. Like there's effort in that tonality, in that voice tone. And sometimes I'll get like nothing. And then I'll be like, come on, dude. Come on, man. Something funny happened today. Something good happened today. What is it? And then they'll be like, well, I did. Or if it's my 9-year-old, well, I did kick a home run in kickball today. And I'm like, dude, no way. What? Come on now. Tell me about that. What happened? And then I'll get a story. Right. And that brings them to life. And the cool thing about that is that's like a really cool way to get your kids into gratitude with you, and you get a story and they're connected. And the thing is when we share something that's exciting with somebody else, especially a parent, like number one, I think we become more interesting because we're interested in them. Right. And they can point to something that happened to them what was great, which is going to bring the energy up. So that's question number 1. Question number 2, I love this one. And we talk about creating environments of psychological safety. A lot of kids out there are scared to tell their parents things that are tough. I was one of them. Maybe you were too. In our house, we have this thing of like, there's always going to be natural consequences, but we always have open discussion. Natural consequences, meaning we're not going to punish you for wrongdoing if you're honest in most cases. Depends on the severity, but for the most part. So I like to ask a question around, what'd you fail at today? What was your biggest challenge today? Like, what did you completely fall on your face at today, and how did you recover? And a lot of times I'll get it. That's when I'll get this. It's almost like that little bit of anxiety, of like, oh man, there's something. I'll be like, all right, come on, man. What is it? And they'll be like, yeah, man, remember that science test? Yeah, I got a D on that. And there's a part of me as a dad that I'm like, dude, I knew you weren't studying. I saw you on your phone. You're wasting your time. Like we know better, right? I just want to go right into lecturing. But I know if I want to have connection with my kid and be effective, what would it be like if they were to lecture themselves and share with me what a strategy was? So I'll praise them for courage first. I'll be like, ooh, buddy. Yeah, man, that took some courage to tell me, right? Yeah, I see you. I get it. So tell me more. Tell me what happened. And I like to use that tell me more instead of why did that happen? Why did you get a D? Especially in that kind of tone, even though I really want to. I really do want to a lot of times. Let's get that straight. I really want to be mean sometimes, but I don't. I'll be like, man, like, so tell me more. What happened? Tell me more is like, bring it in. Why did you get a D is this. It's accusatory. So when I roll out that red carpet of like, tell me what happened, they'll be like, yeah, the test was way harder than I thought. Like the material is way harder than I thought. I didn't study probably as well as I should have. Like, to be honest, like I could have studied more, or so I'll get something like that. And I'll simply just ask, I get that. Like, so if you had to do this all over again, what would you do different? How would you go about maybe getting a C or a B, maybe an A? What would you do different? And they will point back and completely and totally reframe and redo what they did. And then I'll just simply ask, dude, it's a great idea. Like, so when's your next test? And they'll be like, actually, I got a one in English next Wednesday. I'll just say, well, dude, based on what you know now, like, what would you do different? And they'll articulate the exact plan or something different to that effect. And they're the ones saying it, not me. And then I'll be like, well, dude, it sounds like you got a plan to me. How can I support you? Like, do you need some help? Do you need some guidance? Do you want me to quiz you? Anything? And normally they walk away from those conversations with that growth mindset of like, I just solved my own issue and my dad didn't get my face. And by the way, he was also the safe guy for me to call, because I'd like that question over and over and over and over again, because this has happened. I'll get a phone call at 2 a.m. Dad, I need you. And I would much rather get a phone call like that than to wake up to something worse with an authority figure on the other side telling me something horrific has happened to my son because he made a decision he was too scared to tell me. So that's question number 2. And the third question is this. I always like to get them back into gratitude, but I also want to know what's exciting on the horizon for them. And I'll be like, hey, what do you got coming up either tomorrow or this week that you're excited about? And they'll tell me. It could be like, hey, we got a self-defense class in school coming in tomorrow. Like, I'm really excited to check that out. So when they come home from school the next day, that's usually the first thing I'll ask them about. I was like, dude, today was a day about self-defense. Like, tell me about it, man. You were excited about it. Because I truly believe that an interested, connected dad is interesting. And that's the kind of connection a kid, I think, truly needs and wants. And not to mention they thrive in.
I love that. Okay. I've got kids that are 30, 27, and 26, and I've made it my mission to be the best dad I can be. And I haven't always been the best dad I could be. I traveled a lot and all that stuff. There's three things I would add. One is that every time you get an opportunity to mirror their problem, I've been there. Yeah, in the third grade or fifth grade, I've been there. Then you don't hurt your credibility, you increase your credibility, because the problem the mud they just stepped into, you've been in that mud, and they might ask you what you did. They might not. It doesn't matter. You've been there. And then as they get older, to maintain that connection, the biggest indicator of connection is when they move out of the house. They got no choice but to talk to you at dinner when you're home. When they're home and you're home, they got no choice. They can't avoid it. But will they pick up the phone when they're out with their friends? Will they pick up the phone when they're off at college or wherever they may be? And the answer to that question is depends. Depends. If you don't accept them, they don't feel fully accepted for who they are, not for who you wanted them to be or who you thought they should be, they won't pick up the phone. The next one is you can't judge them. You got to stand beside them. I'm an attorney, never been in a courtroom except in law school when we were practicing trial law, not my cup of tea. But I've never seen a judge sitting by somebody that's been accused. They're up on the bench. Okay. When you are a father, you cannot be up on the bench. You've got to be right beside them. And when they feel that, they'll stay connected. And the last thing that I have is true, false, or indifferent. They think we are projecting. We have expectations. We have dreams and goals for them, which we all do. But when they fall short, they don't want projection. And it goes back to that acceptance again. And so you can't, if you want your kid to get better grades and go to med school or whatever it might be, can't do it. Can't do it. They'll never go to med school or whatever their highest version of them is. And so that's been my experience the last handful of years is no judgment. And it's hard because our kids are stupid just like we were, and they do dumb things from time to time, and you can't show judgment. Your thoughts on those?
This is why I do this podcast, because, my oldest is 19, and what I just learned from you was gold, right? And this is one of the things that I love about having a man. I think every man should have another man in his life who is ahead of him, whether it's in wealth or parenting or marriage or faith or something like that, to where, we get to learn from men like you, because I'm behind you about 10 years when it comes to parenting. And I have a 19-year-old who just graduated and he's still here. He literally just got an offer for a full-time job today. And as he's going through his full-time job, he's going to be doing EMT training, paramedic, and then he's going to the fire academy. So this full-time job is somewhat temporary, but it's also his first full-time job and he's still living here. But we are in that phase right now where exactly what you just said is exactly what's on my mind. It's like, how do we continue these connections as they're really, really, really building this next phase of their life? Because it's going to look a little different. And some of it will be the same, but a lot of the dynamics are going to change. So what you just gave to me was a tremendous gift and a tremendous gift even to your audience. So thank you for that. But I agree with you 100% from what I know now.
Well, for those, let's talk about tap into the young men that aren't fathers yet, and they want to be the best dad they can be. And maybe they didn't have the best dad. What is your recommendation for young men that might be in their high teens, 20s, 30s, or thinking about having kids, or they've got somebody they're with that's expecting, and they're going to be a dad pretty soon? What do you say to those guys?
Buckle up, tie your shoelaces, get ready. Yeah, get those hands ready for diaper changing. No, there's a lot, right? I mean, man, you and I could probably jam on this for so long. You've been a dad for 30 years. I've been for 20. I love this question. And you know what? I will say this. I wish I would have known this. There's a few things. If you're a new dad and again, you have no idea what you're in for and what's about to happen, or if you're a brand new dad, maybe a few months in or a year, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, what am I even doing? I don't even know what tomorrow looks like. What day is it? Is it even the week? What year is it? Like, you're in really good company. Like it feels like that. Like you played in the NFL, right? How many years did you train for that?
Yeah. So my son played in the NFL, but I didn't.
Well, I thought you did.
No, I've been an NFL agent for 30 years representing these guys. But fortunately, my son made it for 3 seasons. So that was super dope.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, so you've seen these guys come up then, and you know how many hours that these young men put in to be in the NFL. right? It's insane. And then, so anything we do well in life, right? Whether you're in the NFL, whether you're an architect, whether you're a stockbroker, whether you're, a medical doctor or an electrician, there's training that you've gone through, right? And here's the crazy thing that I think you probably know, and I've learned from being a dad, is that anything we do well in our careers, or whether it's martial arts or sports or whatever, we have a coach, we have training. There's a curriculum, like we learn, right? Same thing with even being an electrician or a plumber or anything that we do in the trades, we learn. And when you're a parent, somehow, some way, from a society expectation and even expectation of ourselves is, I should know how to do this and I should know how to do it naturally. And if I don't, then I'm less than, or I'm weak. And I'm here to tell you I think that's one of the greatest lies that we tell ourselves. And I think you should let yourself off the hook that if you don't know what to do, it's probably not your fault. Especially if you've come from a really horrific background or a crazy background, it's really not your fault. However, the cool thing about it is that you can do something about it. You can learn about it. You can say yes to learning, and not have to think that it comes naturally. So a couple of things that I'll share that I think has worked really, really well for me. And I think probably for a lot of people, which is a lot of men and moms and dads both, what they want to do is when they have kids, they want to slide that marriage to that back burner, right? She's good. I'm good. And like, we're all right. And it's all about the kids, and it's all about the high level conversations around the activities, the plans. And we put that connection with our wives, I think, on the back burner. And I think they do somewhat to the same to us. I'm of the belief that Jessica and I, we've been married for 22 years and we are the foundation of this house. If we don't show our boys what good looks like, then I think that's a big miss. And plus, if we crumble, then quite frankly, I think the rest of the family suffers for it. I'm not to sit here to say that there's not wonderful single moms and wonderful single dads and wonderful blended families out there. Just some relationships, quite frankly, they just don't work out. But if I were to advise myself 20 years ago, or any man who's new to this, is put your wife on that front burner always, right? And make sure that you are connected to her. I wish someone would have told me this too. Our wives have 3 basic needs when it comes to relationships. They need to feel seen, they need to feel heard, and they need to feel safe. And we're usually not the greatest at fulfilling those, not because we don't want to, it's because we don't know them. And a man's 3 greatest needs in a relationship is to feel appreciated, respected, and we need physical affection, which usually has to do more with validation. And what we try to do is we try to fulfill the other's needs in our own, or we love them in our own love language and not the way that they receive it, and it falls flat. And then what happens is this little fester of resentment starts to set in, these little stories we tell ourselves and little ways that we view each other. And suddenly we start to kind of disconnect. And then suddenly there's tension between us. And then it's like we're operating in our own orbits. And then that's when we wake up sometimes 5 years later and our wives roll over and say, I don't know if I really want to be in this anymore. Or we might even say it to them. And I think if we just simply knew those basics, like how does this person receive love? How do I make her feel seen, heard, and safe in my best efforts? How do I communicate how I feel most respected, appreciated, and validated? And here's the cool thing, I think, when you're a dad is, and this is, I think, more the easy button for us, is boy or girl, regardless of age, they have the same basic needs as your wife, to feel seen, to feel heard, and to feel safe. If you can be that kind of dad to your kids, then you're fulfilling those needs, and that connection is usually pretty solid. So there's a couple things there. I can stop there if you want, or I can keep going, whatever you.
I would like to tap in with you on this. 1,000,000% agree that once you get humming as a family and your kids are in activities, and doesn't matter what it is, your schedule revolves around them and your marriage revolves around them, and you lose your marriage. And my kids have told me this in their 20s. Dad, it's not what you've said. It's what you've done. And they really do copy what we do, not what we say. And that's a big piece of humble pie when you're very intentional about what you say, but you're not as intentional about what you do. So I got called out probably about 6-7 years ago about being a hypocrite, because I always know what to say, but I don't always do it. And my kids, they pulled the carpet from under my feet and said, bro, you need to pick up your game. That is like judgment. Ultimate test that you fail when your kids go, bro, you're not living up to your own standards. It's like, holy smokes. So that was a wake up call for me. And that's all been rectified. And I would add some more basic needs. I would add 2 basic needs to what you said. The seen and heard, I'm 100% in. Safety and stability, absolutely, for women. I also think that humans, both genders, we want to feel worthy. And some of us do and some of us don't. And I would say that the majority of the population feels worthy until they get to a certain point. And when they start having too much success, they sabotage themselves. And then the other one is one of the confidence killers is comparison. Our kids, our wife, ourselves, we want to know we're good enough. So it's those two concepts of worthiness and we got what it takes. So one of the things that I don't know what book my wife read several years ago about, make sure you instill in your kids they're enough. Just if we're human beings, we're not human doers, but we're evaluated, judged, honored, compensated by what we do more than who we are. But our kids want to know that we love them for who they are, not what they do. So sports, theater, grades, jobs don't matter. Yeah, they matter, but they don't. So that's my thought on that. Your take on that?
I think that is absolutely solid gold. I was at a Tony Robbins event 11 years ago, and he said, does anybody know what the greatest human fear is? And I was sitting there thinking and he let the silence sort of set in, people really kind of go with their thoughts on what it could be. And I was like, well, is it dying? Is it burning to death? Is it drowning? Is it heights? Is it, I don't have enough faith and I go to the hot inferno of hell, or what is it? I don't understand. And he said that we're not good enough, that we won't be loved, and we'll be left alone. And when he said that, I remember just this chill going over the entire audience. He's like, think about it. Human beings, and you said it right. I love that quote, by the way. I love that comment of we're human beings, not human doings. And we joke about that comment a lot in our house when we start to get really, really too busy and stop connecting. We're like, hey, we're being too much human doings. So why don't we be human beings and connect a little bit? But yeah, I mean, we as human beings, to think about it, one of the worst, we're tribal people, and we're one of the worst things that we could be taken away from us is love, connection, and a part of the community or a part of the family, or isolation. And I go back to one of my most favorite movies of all times, which is Shawshank Redemption. I think that really encapsulates, what happens to a human being in isolation, not good enough with their own thoughts. Is that, Andy Dufresne was in one of the worst prisons in the country, eating terrible food that had maggots in it, being chased around by other people who were beating him up. And yet he had his circle of friends, and he was at most times calm and at peace at most times. But the times that were most horrific for him was in the hole, for 30 days and then another 30 days, 2 straight months of nothing but darkness and in your own thoughts. And horrific things, I think, happen to a human being when they're in that situation. And I think sometimes we get in that cell with the darkness like that, when we start to ask ourselves, well, am I good enough? Maybe I'm not, and then we start to isolate from others. I heard from a really good mentor of mine not too long ago that isolation is the enemy of excellence. And when we don't feel that we're worthy or good enough, I think that that's one of the things we do, and it just compounds that feeling. So man, I think you just nailed it, just dead on.
Yeah, that's why people shut down. That's why guys don't return your phone calls and your kids hide in their rooms. Something that just popped in my mind was the concept of a story vault. Every dad should create a story vault. When they were 9, when they were 11, when they were 17, and they were 19, and they were facing issues with friends, girls, guys, sports, getting cut, not making the team, tryouts, grades, social acceptance, whatever you pick the category. If you can have at the tip of your tongue your own story of that time and that place, you automatically create that safety you talked about with your kids, because they see you as this old dude that can't relate. Like, you don't know what it's like, Dad. Dating's different now. Girls are different now. Dudes are different now. You didn't have social media. You didn't have cell phones. It's still the same, but you got to have stories that connect. And so one of the things my boys especially a few years ago start digging. I didn't do it. They did it. Hey, Dad, what happened here? Why'd you do this? Why didn't you do that? Hey, what'd you do with Mom? How'd that all go down? All of a sudden, I'm like, what the heck? What's going on here? And then I realized they just wanted to know previous versions of me. They wanted to be able to identify not with Craig at 40 or 50 or 60. They wanted to identify with Craig at 20, 25, and 30.
Right.
So I would encourage dads to consider doing that. Create a story vault that's age appropriate, age specific to your kids, so that you can connect with them, because most of us have gone through what our kids are going through.
Can I share something on that?
Absolutely.
That was gold. And I say that because as you were talking through that, I was like, I started just thinking about my 11-year-old who is starting the 6th grade. So he's out of elementary school as of this coming year and into middle school. And you forget what it's like. Those feelings that you got walking in that school at middle school is different than elementary school. What it was like on the playground and, now playing youth sports with middle schoolers versus elementary. And as you were saying that, like literally like these experiences and the way I saw the world just sort of rushed over me. And it was really, really telling of like, man, like if I really want to speak his language, that's the language that I need to lean into versus the 50-year-old me.
Yeah.
Right. And man, like, that's what I'm saying. Like podcasting like this and having people in our lives who can say, hey, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? And I mean, maybe I'm coming on your podcast to share a few things, but I just want to tell you, you're really blessing me over here. I really mean that. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, I don't talk about fatherhood and dads a lot, but it's my number one passion. So when I saw you as a guest, my brain all morning has been, kind of like just thinking about dad stuff, So that's where my brain's at. What do you see as like the biggest mistake dads make that, it's like this concept? How would you like to be in a situation where you're a father and you don't do things like maybe the best version of you could do? You don't put in the energy and effort, and you're going to your kid's high school graduation, and your kid gives you a message, something like, hey, Dad, now you don't have to see me anymore because I'm going to move across the country or go to the military or whatever it is. And you're like, oh my God, how can we help men not have that kind of scenario? Because it's not that you don't want your kids to leave the house, but you also don't want the opposite. You don't want them to ever not come back. And I think a lot of dads are so hell-bent on the provision game, got to provide, that they forget to connect with their kids along the way. And then about the time they want to connect with their kids are too busy to connect with them. Your thoughts?
I think my answer might be a little bit different than what you're expecting, or maybe it's right on.
It's all good. Whatever you got.
I go back to, I look at how a lot of fathers out there operate. You'll usually find a dad/husband in one of two places for a long time, and that's work or home. And that's not to say that that's a bad thing, right? But usually, the man is out there slaying dragons in the workplace. He's battling. He's overwhelmed. He's stressed. He's got a lot of things going on. And then he's got to, and it's not like he doesn't want to come home and be dad. That's not what I'm saying. Like, in fact, I really need to applaud men of this generation in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, is that I think we see a generation of men who are really, really eager to step up. And I mean, we're seeing more dads at baseball games now. We're seeing more dads at sporting events, getting involved with their kids all over the place, which is great. I think one of the biggest gaps, though, is exactly what you and I have been doing on this podcast for the past 40 minutes, which is we miss these iron sharpen iron relationships that are outside of our family that help us elevate even more. Like, I'll give you an example. Before we hit record today, I was scratching my head trying to think to myself, how can I better connect with my 11-year-old right now, who's on summer break, and we have a great connection. We have a great relationship, but I also know that there's some heavy things going on with him and his friends right now. There's like that middle school friend dynamic and that kind of thing. And I've been talking at him a lot, maybe not with him as much. And I think when you surround yourself with the right men who share a vision of how important fatherhood is to them and are open to have conversations around how we can be better, the world, I think, becomes a better place, because what you just did for me is a perfect example of what we do in our community and in our Dad Edge community, which is I got to learn from you, and now I get to go be a better dad because I get to go share relatability and a story with my 11-year-old that I didn't have 40 minutes ago. So I think one of the biggest misses that men do is they try to go at this alone, and they try to go at this without asking for help, because it's our pride and it's our ego. We don't want to mention to anybody, hey, I really don't have this one figured out. I really don't know how to connect with this 11-year-old on this one. I feel like I'm falling on my face. Like, what do you think? And then somebody comes along, you have a conversation with a man who's ahead of you in life, or who might know a thing or two more than you. And you're like, and that's it right there. So I think men can do, if you really want to improve perhaps the connection in your family, with your marriage, your faith, finances, I think all of those things, it's taking a really good look at who is your circle of people that you're spending time with outside of your family. And do you have that person in your life who's ahead of you? Do you have that person in your life who is with you that you can kind of spar with, right? And then do you have the person behind you that you're teaching to reinforce all those beautiful lessons? And I think that's one of the biggest things that men do miss. And it's one of the easiest ones to overlook.
I agree with that. In my pro mindset, I talk about pit crew.
Yeah.
And, men don't like pit crews. They want to do it by themselves, Interesting side note related to middle school. I have a son, my second child, who we didn't know whether to name him Johansson Ted or Ted Johansson. We just knew it was going to be Johansson and Ted. So we're literally in the hospital in Northwestern in Chicago, had this young, our second child, and we're like flipping a coin. Does TJ sound better or JT? Because somebody's going to call him something. So we went with Ted Johansson. Well, through sports and whatnot, he was known as JoJo. And every year for the first 5 years of his elementary school, he didn't know who they were talking about when they were asking, taking first day attendance. And they go, Ted, we named him Ted Johansson. Hey, is Ted Domann here? He's not Ted Domann. He goes by JoJo. So he was distraught. And he came to us the summer before his middle school and said, I want to change my name. Well, you do? What do you want to change your name to? I want to make it Johansson Ted. So we did. That was what he got for his birthday. We changed his name from Ted Johansson to Johansson Ted. So when he started the 6th grade, first day of school, he was Johansson Domann. And so when you think about identity and you think about how important a name is and the meaning of that name and the connection that we have to our name, it was very overt for my son, very impactful. And it wasn't that difficult to change his name. And it didn't matter to us because it was just flipping the name. So when you were talking about your 11-year-old, my brain kind of tapped into that quick story, but then it was like, okay, I got one suggestion for you. God gives all of us dreams. God gives every single one of us dreams, multiple dreams at times, and we usually kill our own dreams. And some people are walking the planet right now and they have no dream because they ran out of dreams, and every dream they've thought they had, they couldn't achieve it. They didn't get to the mountaintop, so they just go, I can't. Why? They stop dreaming. The best gift a dad can give to his son or to his daughter is to put oxygen into the dream. I would take your son out on a date, go camping, go fishing, whatever you guys do, and ask him his dreams. And then you get to be the voice of God by telling him and casting a vision for how that dream can happen. Maybe even giving him some ideas on how to build a bridge from where he's at to where he wants to go. Because he has this dream, but right now it's kind of an external place or status or something. We need to turn our dreams into internal games. And the only way that we can do that is if we know there's a way to get there. And so if your 11-year-old has a dream and you help that dream have life, you've given your son life.
I love that. I love that. Especially those one-on-one times where you're off the grid a little bit. You're casting a fishing line into the water next to each other around a campfire, having those conversations. I love those.
This is your podcast, so I got to ask you questions. All right. So let me ask you this. How have you reframed your childhood so that it works for you and not against you? And how have you reframed your mother's life partnerships, so that you can stay content and thrive in a monogamous marriage to the same woman for 22 plus years and moving forward? And the only reason I ask you these questions is because if you don't reframe it, it doesn't go away. It pulls you down. And if you reframe it, you can change it. And when you reframe the past, you can create a different future. So what have you done to do that?
A lot of therapy. Serious. Yeah. A lot of therapy, a lot of inner work. And what I can tell you is I'll be 50 next week. And I spent a lot of years being victim and looking back on that and pointing to the reasons. This is why I'm not patient as a father. This is why I have communication issues. This is why I have, commitment issues. This is why I all this stuff. I don't even need to go on. You know where I'm going. And it's probably been within the past decade that I've done the most deep work, and probably and I would say the last 3 years have been the most revealing and the most refreshing, because I look at my childhood now as a blessing. And usually when I share what my background looked like, I usually preface it with, I'm going to share a story, but I invite you to find the blessings in this and zero pity. No pity. I don't want any pity. This is not a sob story. This is a comeback story, right? And what I'll tell you about just my childhood is I learned what not to do in a lot of cases, but there was also a lot of things I did learn that were great. It wasn't all bad. There were seasons that were good. And what I'll tell you is now that I'm a parent, and I've been a parent for 20 years, that I think people do the best with what they have, and they do the best possible thing that they can. I'll give you a great example. My dad decided to exit my life not once, but twice. And, we've had a 20-year relationship now. He's still married to the same woman. And I have 2 younger half brothers. And I could have spent this 20 years like harboring ill will and punishing him. But I'm not going to waste this precious time. Time is fleeting. And I think when we realize that, and he's owned every bit of it. He's like, if I had to do it all over again, worst 2 mistakes I've ever made. But he's like, but I can't go back and do anything. I can't, all I can do is apologize for it. And I've given him that forgiveness and grace because I know as a dad myself, I can only hope that I will get that grace because my kids are going to grow up with their own bag of tricks from me. They're going to look back and be like, dude, like, what about that? What about that? What about that? And I'm going to be sitting there like my dad and my mom being like, yeah, didn't know what I was thinking then. And I'm sorry. And I just hope I get that grace that I've been able to give. I wasn't always able to give it, but I am now. And I think it has a lot to do with what we focus. I'll finish with this. What we focus on grows and what we focus on expands, even if it's the things we don't want. So if I think about all the horrific things that I don't want to be, right, that's exactly who I'm going to be. Versus like, if we really get to break this pattern, like, and I say we as all the guys, everyone who's listening out there, if you came from a bad childhood or you came from horrific experiences or trauma and you're like, there's no hope for me. What I invite you to do is not necessarily focus on the things that you learned that you're not going to repeat, but what do you get to go do? What do you actually get to go create versus the things that you're trying to avoid? And just a quick psychological experiment on this. Like a lot of people are like, well, I'm not going to be impatient. I am not going to hit my kids. I am not going to be a bad communicator because that's what I was. That's just as good as no matter what you do right now, I don't want you to think of a giant pink elephant in your front yard wearing a blue hat staring at your house. No matter what you do, don't think of a giant pink elephant with a blue hat staring at your house. And it's right there. So instead, what would it look like to be like, I might not have had the best example growing up on what communication and a functional relationship look like, but I bet I could learn. And what would it be like for my wife and I to go learn that together and for us to go co-create something completely different and completely new and something that's positive? What would that look like versus running away from this thing that was not the best experience? I think that's probably what I've learned over the years.
I like that. One of the things I've learned in the last handful of years is the concept that we don't remember anything unless it had an emotional charge. And so we remember our negative charges more than our positives. And if you go back to any point in time of your life, the only things you can remember and the things you do remember about your childhood, there was an emotion attached to that. You felt abandoned. You felt like there was something wrong with you. Like you were the reason. Your mom was, the dads were leaving. All those types of things. Your kids are doing the same thing. No matter how wonderful of a home we have, no matter how amazing our communication is with our kids, no matter how brilliant we are with our intentions, our kids don't always receive it the way we send it. And because of that, we need to work on ourselves first and make sure that we diffuse the emotion from our past and that we reframe it. And you might have a different emotion now, maybe a blessing now. Sure wasn't fun then, but it's a blessing now. Certain parts, we need to help our kids do that too. And so I think one of the things that's, I would add a fourth question to your 3 questions. Can't do it every day. Can't do it every day. It's too heavy, but you can do it on big days like birthdays and, special moments. Hey, what have I done that has made you feel like you're not good enough? Mm-hmm. When have I ever made you feel invisible? When's the last time that you can remember when you had something to say, but I was too busy to listen? I might even have asked you the question, but I was on my way out the door and said, hey, I'll get back to you on that. Because there's an emotional charge that your kids have related to that. And it may have been last night, and it may not be that big a deal. But over time, because we play mind games with ourselves, it gets bigger, it gets worse. And so probably the best gift we can give our kids as we send them off into the world, but you can't just wait till they're 18 to do it, is consistently and periodically helping them reframe their emotional connection to their past. Because there isn't a dad out there that hasn't been in a situation where they had good intentions and it ended up blowing up in their face because they got a call about work in the middle of dinner. They had some stress going on that, couldn't tell the kids what was going on, but it caused the dad to act angry when the kid is like, what's going on? We were talking about baseball or something and the dad just getting angry. I've been that dad. And so one of the gifts we can give our kids is to help them almost like kill those negative experiences because they won't even remember them unless there's an emotional connection to them.
I love that. I feel like I've learned more from you on this podcast than anything. So I appreciate that.
You are welcome. Well, I want to thank you for being on Pro Mindset today, Larry. I would like for you to share, it'll be in the show notes as well, but just kind of share where people can find you, all your channels.
Sure. So I'm not hard to find. Larry Hagner, it's kind of a unique name. It's not many of us out there, I don't think. TheDadEdge.com, The Dad Edge YouTube, The Dad Edge Instagram, on Facebook, The Dad Edge. I do want to announce I have a new book coming out. This goes on the shelves on September 16th of 2025. It's called The Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood. It's broken up into 4 parts, which is man, husband, father, leader. And this is packed full of all the lessons we've learned in a decade of doing this work. I say we because we've got a community of dads that do life with us, and that's coming out here soon. So I would say the best way to connect with me is usually social media, but also we've got a lot of free resources on the website for guys. One is called Intimate Conversation Starters with Your Wife. So it's a generative question tool. It's PDF. It's fun date questions you can have with your wife. You can find that at thedadedge.com/25 questions. And if you want any advice on patience, that seems to be one of the biggest crucibles for men is testing our patience with our kids. We've got a course on patience. So you can check that out as well. But you can always connect everything to the Dad Edge. So however we can help you, whether it's live coaching in our mastermind or just subscribing to our weekly newsletter that goes out every Friday or the podcast. Been doing it for 10 years and have 1,400 episodes under our belt. So got enough. I always say we got enough content to keep anybody busy for a little bit. but yeah, those are the easiest places to find me. And I just want to say this has been such a pleasure. I think not only for your audience for your audience to hear from you really, and for me, it's been a real pleasure for me personally because I feel like I came on here to share a few things that I've learned, but I'm the one who feels blessed, and I'm the one who feels that I got so much here from you. So I just want to, again, thank you for pouring back into me.
You are welcome. And I want to encourage all the listeners to check out Dad Edge. It's the biggest impact you can make on the next generation, which is your own kids. Thank you very much. Hey, it's Craig Domann, the host of Pro Mindset Podcast. I want to thank you for listening or watching today's show. And you can catch us every week on the normal social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all the listening podcast platforms. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And more importantly, I hope you gained a pro mindset insight. Please be sure to rate and review Pro Mindset Podcast. And I look forward to catching up with you on our next show.